Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. So this time, we're looking at something a little different. We found this YouTube video,
Oh, yeah.
and it's analyzing another YouTube video. And that video is focused on this document that's filled with nothing but the phrase "Poopoo Peepee."
Okay.
Sounds a little crazy. But we're going to try and figure this out today, see if there's anything we can learn from this document.
All right, sounds good.
So what do you think about this whole thing?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, when you look at it, it just seems so simple. It's just this one phrase, repeated over and over again. But then you start to ask yourself questions like, why would somebody make this? What were they trying to say? Is there a deeper meaning here?
Right. It's kind of like our brains are wired to find meaning everywhere, even when maybe there isn't any. Like, we almost can't help ourselves.
I think so. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines. We're always looking for connections and trying to make sense of the world around us.
So where do we even start with something like Poopoo Peepee? I mean, the YouTube video goes through a bunch of different interpretations, some a little more realistic than others.
Right. Well, I guess the first question is, could this be a language?
A language.
Yeah. Like some sort of ancient or lost language that we just haven't figured out yet?
It's like a secret code. We need to crack the code of Poopoo Peepee.
Exactly.
That's kind of a cool thought. Like, what if we just stumbled upon this, like, key to some hidden civilization or something?
Yeah, that would be amazing. But realistically, I don't think Poopoo Peepee really qualifies as a language.
Why not?
Well, if you think about how languages actually work, they have this really complex structure. There's grammar and syntax and all these rules that govern how words are put together to create meaning. And Poopoo Peepee, it just doesn't have that.
So it's a little too simple to be a real language.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so scratch the language theory. But what about a secret code? Maybe each poo-poo or peepee represents a different letter or symbol.
That's an interesting idea. But again, without a key to decipher the code, it's just pure speculation.
So we're back to square one.
It seems like it.
But the YouTube video goes on to suggest that maybe it's not about the words themselves, but more about the repetition.
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
So what do you make of that?
Well, repetition is a powerful thing. I mean, think about how it's used in all sorts of different contexts.
Like,
Well, like mantras, for example. People repeat these phrases over and over again as a form of meditation or prayer.
right.
Or lullabies. Those soothing melodies that help babies fall asleep.
Or even those annoying jingles that get stuck in your head for days.
Exactly. Repetition has this way of bypassing our conscious thought and tapping into something deeper, something more primal in our brains.
So maybe Poopoo Peepee, in its own weird way, is doing something similar.
I think that's a really interesting possibility.
It's like our brains are saying, okay, this is nonsense, but we're going to try and make sense of it anyway.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if maybe that's part of the point. Maybe the creator of this document wanted to provoke that kind of response.
To make us think about the nature of meaning itself.
Exactly.
Okay, this is getting deep. But before we go
Oh.
too far down that rabbit hole, there's another document we should talk about. One that also plays with repetition, but in a very different way.
Oh, you mean the one with the phrase, better grab a mop, it's getting sticky why and dispy.
That's the one. Quite a contrast to Poopoo Peepee, huh?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more energetic.
To say the least.
Yeah.
So we don't have a specific analysis of this document, but it's interesting to think about how its repetitive nature could be interpreted in light of what we've already talked about.
Yeah, I mean, if Poopoo Peepee represents the absurdity of emptiness, then maybe this phrase embodies the absurdity of excess.
I like that. Emptiness versus excess.
And the repetition, instead of being soothing or meditative, becomes almost frantic.
like a call to action.
Yeah, exactly.
Like something is seriously wrong and we need to fix it right now.
Better grab a mop.
It makes you wonder about the mindset of the person who created it. What were they going through? What was this sticky situation they were dealing with?
Right, it's like they were trying to exercise something through a repetition.
Wow. Okay, so we've got Poopoo Peepee representing the absurdity of emptiness and better grab a mop representing the absurdity of excess.
And both are using repetition in these really unique ways.
To evoke emotions and challenge our perception.
It's fascinating.
It really is. But all this talk about repetition, it makes me wonder, why are we so drawn to it in the first place? What is it about repetition that has such a powerful effect on our brains?
Well, I think to answer that, we need to look back at our evolutionary history.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So imagine our ancestors, living out in the wild, trying to survive. The ones who are good at recognizing patterns, they had a huge advantage.
How so?
Well, they could spot the tracks of prey. identify poisonous plants,
No.
predict weather patterns.
I see.
It was all about survival.
Hmm.
And that ability to recognize patterns, it got passed down through generations. It's ingrained in us.
So even though we're not out hunting and gathering anymore,
Those ancient instincts are still there.
lurking in our brains.
Exactly. So when we see something like Poopoo Peepee or a repeated phrase about a sticky situation, our brains can't help but try to decode it, to find a hidden meaning.
Even if there isn't one.
It's a fascinating example of how our evolutionary past still shapes the way we think and perceive the world today.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, what other hidden depths might be lurking beneath the surface of things we encounter every day?
Exactly.
Maybe we just need to look a little closer
Yeah,
and be open to the unexpected.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So to all our listeners out there, keep your eyes peeled, your minds open, and your sense of humor intact,
Because you never know where you'll find the next Poopoo Peepee.
waiting to spark a deep dive into the unknown.
And on that note, we'll be back soon with part 2 of this deep dive.
So stay tuned.
And it really highlights the importance of critical thinking, doesn't it? Especially these days, like when you're online and you're just bombarded with information from all these different sources.
It's so easy to just accept things at face value, especially when they come from sources we trust or that seem to align with our existing beliefs.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that not everything we see or hear is true or even accurate.
So how do we protect ourselves
Yeah.
from being misled or manipulated?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
It's about questioning everything, evaluating sources, considering multiple perspectives.
Don't just believe everything you read on the internet.
Right?
So in a way, this whole poo-poo pee-pee thing, it's actually a good exercise in critical thinking.
I think so. It forces us to step back and really examine our assumptions about meaning and interpretation.
And maybe even about the nature of reality itself.
Exactly.
Wow. We started with poo-poo pee-pee. Now we're talking about the nature of reality.
That's the beauty of a good deep dive.
You never know where it's going to take you.
And sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most profound discoveries.
I like that. So to all our listeners out there, don't be afraid to question things, to challenge the status quo,
And to embrace the unknown.
because who knows? You might just stumble upon the next poo-poo pee-pee
Yeah,
and unlock a whole new world of understanding.
that would be amazing.
So what do you say? Should we take a break and come back for part 3 of this deep dive?
Sounds good to me. All right, so we're back. And I gotta say, this whole discussion has really got me thinking about something.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, we've spent all this time talking about these seemingly meaningless phrases. Poopoo Peepee, better grab a mop.
Right.
But they've actually sparked a pretty deep conversation, haven't they?
I think so.
I mean, we've talked about psychology,
Art history,
evolution.
the nature of reality.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. But it's also kind of cool.
I think it just goes to show that sometimes the most profound insights can come from the most unexpected places.
It's like a document filled with poo-poo pee-pee.
Exactly.
So what's the takeaway here?
Well, I think it's about staying curious
Open-minded.
and being willing to explore even the things that seem absurd or meaningless on the surface.
Because you never know what you might find.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, there's more to the world than meets the eye.
I think that's a beautiful thought.
Me too.
So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.
Because the world is full of wonders, just waiting to be discovered.
And sometimes the silliest things can lead to the most profound discoveries.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious.